Hello, in this video, I'm going to talk about using quotations in academic writing. So first, I'm going to talk about when it's appropriate to use quotations, then why overusing quotations is bad. Then I'll talk about how much is okay. I'll give you some kind of benchmarks for how many quotations is appropriate. And then finally, I'll take you through how to properly cite quotations in APA format. So when should we use quotations? Only if the original writing cannot be paraphrased without losing the original meaning. So absolutely anytime we possibly can, if we can put the original idea in your own words, then you should. The only time we should quote anything from the original source is if there's no other way to express that same idea in different words without losing the original meaning. So this is actually pretty rare. This doesn't happen very often. So that means that using quotations should be pretty rare. So we might need to quote things when the original item that we're trying to discuss is very technical, very specific. And if there is simply not another way to capture the original meaning, then we might use a quotation of that original work. So why is it bad to use too many quotations? Well, it weakens our academic writing. So as a professor, I read a lot of papers. And when I read papers that include way too many quotations, my immediate impression of the person who wrote the assignment is that they didn't take the time or make the effort to paraphrase information. So it can appear kind of lazy because instead of taking the time to paraphrase and sort of interpret the information and integrate it into their writing, if you're using quotations when you don't need to, then it kind of gives that lazy appearance. It also can make it appear as if the writer didn't understand the original information enough to put it into their own words. So again, as a professor, when I'm reading something that has tons of quotations, I'm left wondering if the student actually understands the material enough to write about it in their own words. It also weakens your writing because when you put everything into your own words, then you can integrate these different ideas and build to sort of present your own ideas instead of really just regurgitating everything that other people have already written. So when it's in an academic setting and you're a student, your teacher wants to read your original writing and see that you're understanding what you're writing about. And when you're using a lot of quotations, that doesn't really happen. When we're in more of a professional setting and you're writing for publication, publishers especially don't want to see tons of quotations, especially when you're quoting things that could be paraphrased. So a publisher or a journal, they want to publish your own original writing, not just a compilation of quotations from other people's work. Also, if you're using a lot of quotations, especially if they're coming from the same sources, that could still get you into trouble with plagiarism. So it can border on plagiarism if you're using large amounts of quotations from the same sources without the permission of the original authors. So how much is okay? Well, this varies. It depends on the context. It depends on the setting. Depends on the topic and what you're quoting. But a good rule of thumb is if the work that you're submitting is 10% or less quotations, you're probably going to be okay. Now, as a professor, if I'm reading a paper, let's just for simplicity's sake say it's a 10-page paper. If an entire page out of 10 pages is made up of quotations, I would still feel like that was pretty excessive. So you absolutely should not exceed that amount. And whether that 10% is appropriate or not depends on the nature of the quotations. So if the quotations you're including are things that really cannot be paraphrased without losing the original meaning, then that's absolutely appropriate. If it's 10% of quotations and it all could be paraphrased, then I would say that that's too many quotations. So it kind of depends. And it might depend on your individual instructor. It might depend on the journal that you're submitting for publication. So it really depends a lot on the subject matter and the context. Another rule of thumb that you could go by is to not quote more than a sentence or so per page at most. And when I say per page, I'm saying APA formatted, double spaced, 12-point font. So like maybe a sentence or so per page could be appropriate. But again, you should just always paraphrase whenever you can and only use quotations when absolutely necessary. All right, so how to properly cite quotations in APA format. So first of all, anytime we use information from any source, we always need to include an in-text citation following that information to say where that information came from, whether it's quoted or paraphrased. We always need an in-text citation, and we always need to include a reference for that source at the end of that piece of writing. So for a quotation, that's no different, but the only addition is that for a quotation in the in-text citation, you also need to include some indication of the location where that quotation was found within the source. So what that looks like depends on the type of source that it is. So if it's a quote from an article, a book, some other written source that has page numbers, then you're including the page number in that citation. So in APA, just a P, lowercase p with a period after it means page. So if we look down here, this is my quotation in an article. That's my first example. I gave the author's last name, the year of publication, and then page 15 is what that means there. Now, if it's from a website, there aren't pages. So instead, you would indicate the paragraph where that quotation came from. So to do that, PP, lowercase pp, period, indicates paragraph. So for the second example, this is my quotation on a website, and then the author's last name, the page or the year, and then PP 15, that means paragraph 15. Now, there are other types of sources that you might be quoting from. If you're doing something like a video or a presentation, then you would indicate the minute where that quotation took place. So again, the in-text citation looks exactly the same, but here I put min 1:15 to indicate 1 minute 15 seconds. So like the timestamp on a video, just as an example. You might have other sources where these three don't apply. And in some cases, you might just have to get creative, but whatever kind of source it is, you need to include some indication of the location where that quotation came from within the source that you're citing. So for any quotation, it is never adequate to include only the author and the date. You always have to include that third piece if you're citing a quotation. All right, that's all I have for you in this video. Thank you so much for watching.